On this episode of One-on-One, we're going to be talking with Miss Lynn Ellzey. I know a lot of you know her from various jobs she might have had over the years, or the teaching profession, or the chamber. We could go on and on. Right after the break, we'll talk with Miss Lynn. Don't go away. One-on-One is brought to you by the Law Office of Waits and Downer. And welcome back. As promised, Miss Lynn Ellzey is my guest on One-on-One. It's such a great career. Spent a lot of her career at H.L. Bourgeois in South Terrebonne teaching, but there was so much more than teaching. And I'm learning a lot even before the show. And how did you end up in Houma? Let's share that first, because you're not from Houma.
No, not originally. I was born in Mansfield, Louisiana during the war. Then we moved to New Orleans. And my dad was building boats, I think, in New Orleans with Higgins.
Yeah, Higgins boats.
And then we moved to Houma because he was with the Sulphur Company for a number of years. And he became involved with the Sulphur Company when we lived in Port Sulphur first, and then Houma. And then when that went by the wayside, you know, he went to work for Delta Iron Works because he was a machinist. During the war, he built aircraft for the military. So we kind of made our rounds, and I can remember when I first moved to Port Sulphur, I had already been to kindergarten in New Orleans. But over there in Port Sulphur, they didn't really have a kindergarten, but they wouldn't let me start first grade because of when my birthday was. So I had to wait a year before I could get back in school. Maybe that's what did it, but I did well all through school. I was on the honor roll. I was a majorette in high school, well, junior high and high school, a number of years, marching through downtown Houma all the time. That was back in the day before the high-rise bridges. And we started over in East Houma and marched all the way to Lafayette Street, down Lafayette to Point, and then back around to the end of the parade. So that was a long, long route.
And you bring up some interesting points. Before the show, I said, well, I wonder if my dad knew your dad. Your dad would have been a little older, but they would have been at Freeport Sulphur together. But you mentioned the Higgins boats. My uncle built the Higgins boats.
Oh, really?
So I'm sure, and he was a little older than my dad. So maybe your dad knew my uncle also.
Right, it's quite possible.
It's always 6 degrees of separation somewhere.
Right.
So you get to Houma, the big metropolitan area of Houma. Was it culture shock when you first got here?
Not really. I was in the 4th grade, I believe, when I got here. I went to Houma Elementary School. I think in the 6th grade is when S.L. Lacasio, you know, the band director, thought that, hey, I think she would make a good majorette. So through his encouragement, through the years, I did all the classes at the Shady Oak Park. You remember that? Years ago with Skipper Wallace.
Right.
And there were current majorettes at the schools who taught the summertime classes. And I caught on right away.
And Mr. Skipper Wallace, by the way, was the grandfather of Harry McCullough, who does sports for us here and shows at HTV.
Wow.
Again,
yes.
6 degrees of separation. Yeah. So you caught on to Houma pretty quickly.
Right, I did.
And you felt at home. And what about your childhood would lead you later? Because we're going to talk about a lot of things you were involved in. You weren't just a librarian. You weren't just a business teacher. By the way, my sister Myrna says hello.
Oh, good.
Yeah. There was so much more that carved out a path for you. Were you always just this driven, or who put that in you?
Well, I was the oldest of 4 children, and so I felt like I needed to be the leader, so to speak. And I just got involved with things. I was in the first class when Houma Junior High opened, so it was a brand new school. And I can remember sitting in, I think it was Warren Savan's class. He taught science or math or something, and we were in a classroom with windows toward the back of the school out to the yard. And one day it started snowing. And that was one of the first times anybody around here had seen snow. And do you know they let us go outside to play in the snow?
They better.
And I had another incident involving snow later on when I was at South Terrebonne. Pam Bonvalant and I shared being sponsors for the Honor Society. And we were able to do fundraisers at that time. And we took delegations of students to a lot of the national conferences all around the United States. And we happened to be in Minneapolis one time for a big conference. And we had a beautiful hotel room with windows from floor to ceiling, and kind of a wraparound corner room for Pam and me. The boys were on one side, the girls were on the other side. But we got together, we were having a little meeting in our room with the windows to plan our activity for the next day. And it started snowing a lot up there. And the kids were so excited. So at midnight that night, we were outside in the street playing in the snow. Those kids will never forget that trip and that time.
I mean, in a lifetime in Houma, 2 or 3 times you may get snow.
Right.
4 if you're lucky.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, you got to let them go out and play.
Right, yes.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
So let me ask you this, because everything you did sort of had a leadership connotation to it. You were at the chamber. You did promotions for the Southland Mall.
Right.
You
And
represented the teachers.
the mall is not the same now as it once was. I was there during the time that we always had something going on. We always had events taking place. All the fashion shows that took place, I helped coordinate.
I remember that.
And I used to be the moderator.
Talent shows. All
Everything,
kind of thing, yeah.
everything. The little Easter and Christmas and Halloween picture-taking activities
Santa
for the
Claus,
children.
that was big,
right,
yeah.
Right. And there was one event I know that was so unusual. I don't remember exactly what the event was, but I was on the stage and the mall police came around the back side of the stage and pulled me over and said, I hate to tell you this, but he said, we've had a bomb scare, but I want you to carry on as though nothing else is going on while we investigate. And I said, okay.
Take it for the team.
So,
Wow.
so I had to get back on stage and keep everybody close by
Yeah.
and concentrating on what was going on somewhere around
Every little
us.
tick-tock you heard, you're looking around, right? That's gotta be a
So
little
that
unnerving.
was, right, that was a strange situation. Yeah.
Oh, I remember all those promotions, and God, when we were growing up, Mr. Bingle was big.
Right,
Of course, we had Maison Blanche
right. I
back in the day, which is where
Yeah.
Dillard's is now, right?
think so.
Yeah.
Right, I think so.
The mall was a big deal.
Right, it was.
When we knew we were getting a mall, Homer's big enough to have a mall? Well, I guess we were.
Do you remember the court that was down on that side of the mall in front of Maison Blanche and whatever? There was a big sign in the what would have been a fountain area with fancy wooden carved signs telling you which direction to go. And there was one there called Family Amusement Center. And I think it was down toward where Penny's is now, somewhere in there. And when they took that down, I was upset. And they gave me one of those signs, the Family Amusement Center. And until Hurricane Ida hit, I had that hanging up in my den.
But you were in charge of promoting the mall. And back in those days, HTV didn't exist.
No.
What were you using? Mostly radio and newspaper?
Right.
Yeah, so you were
Right.
dealing with Ray Sadie and
Right.
Bill Underwood, I guess, with the other station, and then Mr. Ivy Smith with the paper.
Right.
Those were some legends.
Right.
So
That's right.
how
Yes.
was that job?
It was interesting. But the clicker to it was, see, I had worked with maybe 4 different managers. And one of the managers, a young man from New Orleans, came in, and he thought he could do his job and my job too, and save the company some money. Well, that didn't last very long, and I don't think he lasted long. But it gave me an opportunity to go back to school to work on my degrees so that I could teach.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
Bill was starting to go into
Right.
teaching, and I figured, that might be a good thing. We would have our summers off to
So
be
a
able to do
closed door
things.
opened the window. for you.
Right. So
And you took good
I
advantage
took
of it.
advantage of it, and but they called me about a year or a semester before I was due to graduate, and they wanted to give me my job back. And when I asked them, well, what are you going to offer me? It was less than I was making before. And I said, no, thank you. I'm
Yeah.
too close to getting my degree. I want to get my degree now.
Wow.
So that's what
You
I
had
did.
the momentum in another direction at that
Right.
point. Yeah.
Right.
So how did that open up some doors for you at that point? Where did you go from there?
After I graduated in business ed,
Right.
I decided to, of course, get a job teaching,
Right.
but they wanted to send me to a junior high, not Homer Junior High, another middle school,
Yeah.
teaching something totally out of my field, which I was not happy about at the time. I was doing my student teaching at HL, and one of the business teachers, for some reason I don't even remember anymore, walked out and said she wasn't coming back, and that was 2 months before the end of school. So they asked me if I'd be interested in taking over her job, and I said, well, sure. If the board approves it, that's fine. So the principals talked to the administrators at the central office, and they said, the job's yours if you want it. And I said, well, sure, I'll stay. But it so happened that at the end of the year, that's when a lot of people who were at the low end of the totem pole at a lot of the schools were getting moved, transferred to other places. There were not many places that I would have been interested in going, but it so happened that one of the business teachers at South Terrebonne decided to take a sabbatical. So they asked if I wanted to go there, and I said, well, it's all the way across town, but yes, I'll take it. You know, it's in my field. I'll feel comfortable. And I made new friends, had great principals over there. It was a great school, and I'm so glad I made that move.
How long did you stay at South Terrebonne?
27 years.
Okay. But it all wasn't in business, because at one point
Right.
you go to the library.
Yes.
How does a business expert go to
Well,
the library?
The
Not that anything wrong with the library, it's just a different field.
it's a different field, but it was the audio visuals librarian position became available. And we would, at the time when we were computerizing everything, you know, all the computers were coming in. We no longer had to use the typewriters that was so hard to make corrections for. And that reminds me of another story.
Did you have the
too.
correctable typewriters, or
Yes,
you had to put the
we
little
had-
white thing in?
No, we had correctable. Well, originally it was the old ones.
Now, for all you young
The
people
old
out
fa-
there,
old-fashioned.
Google typewriter. You might learn something.
Right. So then we got the correctable Selectrics, and
Yeah.
then we moved from there to computers, and they were the old style Tandy computers where you had to use floppy disk,
Yeah.
and we were in the
Yeah, it made that
process
noise.
of
That would change,
computerizing
yeah.
the whole library, the whole library system, and that was quite a job, you know, to
So
do.
you had the display terminals all over the
But
library.
we had to use floppy disk,
Yeah.
the floppy disk system. And it was so cumbersome in a big high school library that when the newer system came through, we were elated. Actually, I helped some students who wanted to get credit for subjects that were not being taught. We were working with a university, Western Carolina University, if I recall correctly. And they provided us with classes that would meet the needs of students who couldn't find subjects in the school. And they would do their classwork looking at the TV screen, being taught by a university person. And it was generally a foreign language of some type, or a higher math or something like that. You know, some of it I could grade, but then I had to send it in. And those students got credit.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm. This one-on-one program has been brought to you by the law offices of Waits and Downer.